servitude to God, in serving mankind in response to what he has done. That's our humility. That's our memorial. It's us. The second point moves to compassion. Because we remember, it should make us humble. But the second part is, because we remember, we should have compassion. Now, it's interesting, the word compassion, because it comes from a Latin word that actually means you hate to see someone suffer, and you will move to do something about it. You have to have those two things to form the word we have today as compassion. You hate to see the suffering, and you are moved to do something about it. Now, I don't know what the word is called, but there must be a word for just hating to see somebody suffer but not doing anything about it. Maybe that's called modern Christian. Maybe that's called the modern Christian. But the idea is we should be moved with compassion like God was moved with compassion. Not just to hate the suffering or hate what the person is tangled in, but to actually respond and do something about it. Now, the universal principle of this compassion that I love about God is it does not count fault. Whether the person is in trouble because of something they did or they're in trouble because of natural disaster, it's a movement that we would have with compassion to respond, to not just loathe or hate the fact that they're in trouble, but to be moved to do something about it. And that's because of a direct response of what God has done for us. Turn to Luke chapter 15. In Luke chapter 15 and verse 20, you should know the story very well, the prodigal son. It says that while that son, when he finally had come to himself and had decided to come back home, he says that while he was a great way off, it says the father saw him, and it says he had compassion. He ran, fell on his neck, and kissed him. The whole point in Luke 15 and 20 is to show you that God is moved with compassion when it's time to restore us. Now, this is a particular scenario where clearly that son was at fault. He screwed up. He messed up. He did it. But instead of judging him, instead of pointing a finger, instead of treating him any other way but good, the father decided to be moved with compassion and do something. He expects us to mirror that image with one another. Oh, sure, we can look at a person and say, yeah, they shouldn't have done that. We could do that. We could point fingers and say, oh man, again? How many times are you going to do this? Aren't you glad we don't serve a God that did that to us? How many times could he say, wow, Clyde's still messing up with that one, huh? Wow, can't believe he's already going to do that again. How come he hasn't dumped those friends yet? Why is he still going to those places? Why is he still doing those things? God could, but our God moved with compassion. Has open arms to help. We should be doing the same thing because that is our, again, memorial to God. We are a living memorial. And so not just that we have humility, but also compassion. Take the story. Turn with me to Matthew 18. In Matthew chapter 18, around verse 27, this is the story of the unjust steward. Now here was a steward, as you recall, and this was in response to a question that Jesus had, or the apostles had rather, about how many times should we forgive people. Perfectly here, because compassion has no limits. Compassion has no limits. So clearly in this story, in Matthew 18, we see this unjust steward who could not pay back an amount that he owed, but it said that his Lord was moved with compassion and forgave the debt. Wow, talk about hating to see somebody into something. But then to forgive the debt, is that not exactly what happened to us on Calvary? Jesus went to Calvary on that cross, suffered, bled, and died for the sins of the world, and he didn't just be moved with compassion or just hate the sin. He took on that sin and took it away, nailing it to the cross. What great compassion is this? And here in Matthew 18, it's talking about how this Lord of this steward was moved with compassion because the steward was in need. And he did something about it. He forgave the debt. Well, the flip side of that, of course, if you keep reading, he says that this same steward had an opportunity, not even comparable to the amount he was forgiven. Isn't that like us? We don't want to forgive one thing that happened to us when Christ has how many? How many times have we crucified Christ over and over and over and over again, but when our brother or sister does something, they get one chance. Amen. One chance. It's sad as we look at the relationships that we have, and that we walk around on this planet, instead of full of joy, we're wounded. Because we think somebody owes us something. We think that that shouldn't have happened to us. We think that we didn't deserve something. What if Jesus was like that? Jesus comes on the cross and looks straight at it. He didn't do anything to prevent it. He allowed it to happen. He took the ugliest that we could take, and he didn't deserve it. But how many times did you hear him complain? How many times do you hear Jesus saying, I don't deserve this? He never said it. So why do we? Why do we? Christ did what he did because he was moved with compassion. He saw that we could not save ourselves. Doesn't that sound like Israel? Israel could not save themselves from Pharaoh. We cannot save ourselves from sin. So Jesus stepped in to do something about it. He was moved with compassion. And he says then, if we are these living memorials, then clearly we should have the humility and we should have the compassion. And then the last one is my favorite. If we are truly that memorial and we are moved with humility and we honor and glorify God with that, we're moved with compassion, we honor and glorify God with that, then the last thing should be that we should always have a praise for God. There is never a time when we are without joy. Well, I better explain that one. You might be without money. You might have a lot of bills. You might be struggling to pay those bills. You might be in uncertainty with your job. Stability, hey, we don't know. There could be things going on. You might be in a bad relationship right now. You might be struggling because you want to have a relationship. The bottom line is we're all going through things. Nothing that we are going through in this room, right here, right now, is any different than anybody out there. Because 1 Corinthians 10:13 says we're not going to go through anything that's not common to man. Everything that we endure is common to man. Disease, death, poverty, all of that, it's common to man. You're not the only one going through it. We don't like to talk about ours, but that's just the truth of it. Now, so all of those things are constant. But what does that have to do with joy? There's even a difference in happy and joy. But particularly joy is something that has been instilled in you. You couldn't put it there yourself. When I talk about joy, and joy, you need to know this because you need to be able to fall back on joy. Sometimes when the world is not giving you what you need or what you think you should have, you got to be able to fall back on joy. God put joy in every last one of us when he saved our souls. That's the joy that we have in Christ Jesus. So if you are in Christ Jesus, God automatically wired you for joy. Because when things aren't going right, it never changes the fact that God has saved your soul. When things aren't going the way we think they should go, it doesn't mean that Jesus Christ is in a grave. He's risen. He's alive, and he's making intercession for us. That's an unending, never-ending joy that is in our hearts. So because of that, and because we're supposed to fall back on that, that means that our disposition in life shouldn't be up and down, wavy like this. A person that has been washed in the blood of the Lamb should show that joy in every circumstance that they live. Because for us, things can't be as bad. You guys see how quiet it is. I'm telling you about like some joy that this is just my casting pearl before some. You guys getting this? The idea is that you should never have a look on your face like you were baptized in lemon juice. Some of us are so sour looking, as if Christ doesn't live. But he does. And every single day we can be thankful for that because it's more than enough to cover the day. It's more than enough. So you might wake up and, oh man, it's snowing again? That's to God's glory. Do you know if you go to bed with bills, you're